You've connected to Cisco Unplugged.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cisco Unplugged. I'm Dan Klamert, and today we have a very special episode of our highly demanded, highly regarded back to school best practices here for summer of 2025 for all things wireless. And usually get a lot of excitement around this episode and have gotten a lot of great feedback. So if you're finding value in these, let us know. And let us know if there's anything else you'd like to see here in these episodes. But today, I'd like to welcome some special guests here to the show from our CX escalation team here, or the business unit. And I would like to first of all welcome Jay. How are you doing, Jay?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Happy to be
Thanks
here.
for joining us. Appreciate it. And also next here, Amog. How are you, Amog?
Hey Dan, going good.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. And then Jakob, how are you?
Hey, Don. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for being here. And last but certainly not least here, Jesus, how are you? Oh, can't hear you, Jesus.
Sorry.
There
Yeah,
you are.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Happy to be back. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, welcome back. Great to have you back. So before we get rolling here, a couple reminders. We do always take questions live here on the show, and we use Slido. That's our vehicle for taking those questions. So you'll see the QR codes up on the screen. You also, if you're watching via YouTube and you missed that, you can click the description below the video here, and there's a link to join the Slido there. So we'll be monitoring those questions during the episode here, answering them, and probably answering some of them live here when they come in. So don't hesitate to ask your questions as we go throughout the material here. But so as usual, also this will be recorded and on our YouTube channel. We're streaming live now, but it will be recorded for viewing later. It's youtube.com/@Get Unplugged. You can go out there, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You'll be notified when we do go live with our great content. We had a lot of great content that we're still posting from Cisco Live, and caught up with a lot of great partners in the world of solutions. So check that out also on the channel. We had a lot of exciting announcements around wireless at Live, and we covered some of those here recently on the show. So with that, I think I'm done with all the reminders, and I would like to get going here. So let's get unplugged. Jay, let's talk a little bit about today's agenda.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Jay Cedrone. I work on the ICE, and I'm going to go through some the agenda real quickly here. And thanks for that introduction. I know there was a lot of good stuff on Cisco Live that's still coming out. So we'll try to relate some of that stuff. But I'm looking forward to a lot of that coming out as well. So from an agenda standpoint, we're going to go over some software recommendations, and then we're going to look at best practices for ICE and enterprise wireless. The majority of this presentation will be the wireless piece, and we're going to start off with ICE. And as I go through some of the ICE agenda, I will reference the great team we have here with Jesus and Amog and the rest of them from an enterprise wireless standpoint. And then we'll finish off with some troubleshooting tools. So software recommendations. So as we know with a lot of you folks that are rolling out these products, we've got the full suite now with 9800s, the older Air OS, the Catalyst Center, the old DNAC, ICE, and Meraki. There's a lot of moving parts here, right? So there's a lot of interoperability, versioning that's very important. So here are recommended releases, and I'm not going to go through all the smooths of the service packs, but you can see here what we're recommending as far as the Wave 2 IoT APs, Wi-Fi 6, 6E, Wi-Fi 7 APs, and AFC. And there's some good information coming forward in this presentation from the wireless folks in regards to. Oh, sorry. In regards to Wi-Fi 7. But a couple of things I want to point out on this slide, there's some links below, TAC recommendations, wireless compatibility matrix, and the other matrix from Meraki. And I just want to mention one thing is when you go to the wireless compatibility matrix, there is a choice to choose SD access. And at that point, you can actually plug in the different devices. For example, if you're doing Lisp with SD-WAN, it will actually then show you the recommended releases for each of the products from a wireless side, from a DNAC Catalyst Center side, from an ICE side, and from Meraki side. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll add some of these links here under the video description too, so it's easy for our viewers to access some of those links after the fact here.
Great.
Thanks,
So
Jay.
now moving on to ICE best practices. So here we'll just spend about 30-40 seconds, but you can see this and you can also scan the QR code. But here we list our end-of-life updates. So the folks that have been with ICE for a while, you'll notice here you've got to the left here, we've got ICE 3.0, and you can see those dates. The end-of-life notice was January 13th, 2023. And that moves on down to the important part, which is end of support, right? So we just want to make sure you're aware of that. July 13th, 2025, right? So those are some important dates. And then as we move over to the right, we've got 3132, ICE pick, and then we've got the 36 series appliance, and you can see the dates listed there. Again, make sure we're paying attention to the end of vulnerability support as well as end of actual support. That pushes you out to 2030. And then from a 3700 perspective, I just want to make a clarification here. And you can see in parentheses here, this is specific to only the appliances that have the 1050 watt power supply. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's clear. And if you scan the QR code that you see on your screen to the right, that will actually take you, and you'll have the updated dynamic updates of all these dates ready for you. Great. Now, common challenges and best practices, and as we're all aware on this call, that the school networks are dynamic, right? So a lot of these challenges and best practices came out of a lot of our experience with our customers, and some of the challenges that we've seen that are different than many static and other enterprise networks, right? So for example, high number of transient users, right? So we've got users that are guests and students, right? Folks that are coming on with different endpoints onto the deployment that may be classified as guests versus students. There's high frequency of roaming across APs. BYOD, we're all probably familiar with all the different releases that Android, iOS, Apple, all the different handhelds in the how a lot of that security is being more strict, right? So as those gets pushed out. So these are some of the challenges in making sure that we understand those. And then of course, with that comes certificate handling and onboarding. And then, a large number of cases that we've dealt with and learned from is performance issues during peak times, right? So this is at different times of year, on different times of day as well. So those are some of the challenges. And I'm not going to read through, this is a busy slide, so I'm not going to read through all the issues, but I'm going to point out a few of the best practices. So from a security best practice, using EAP-TLS with BYOD, right? And there'll be some more discussion forward in this presentation from a wireless side on the cert-based authentication from the wireless side best practices. Deploying posture checks, right? We want to make sure that all those devices that are coming on are secure. From a guest access perspective, setting device limits on a per user basis, right? So we've got a lot of customers that are deploying that. And then setting reasonable session timeouts, right? So that we're making sure that users that are coming onto the network that are getting proper access, and making sure that we're cleaning up ICE and cleaning up those sessions and making sure that we're allowing for scalability there. And then from a wireless and roaming perspective, right? This is all the folks that have been using ICE and wireless probably have a lot of experience with this. When students roam, when endpoints roam, there's a lot of reliance for ICE on radius, right? So whether it's accounting, interim accounting, which can happen very frequently. So things, and again, I'm just going to point out a few of these important issues with setting the WLC interim accounting to 0, right? So ensuring when there's roaming that we're appropriately dealing with the accounting updates. As we all know, when accounting is sent into ICE, we process that radius accounting, and there's all sorts of thresholds that can be met. From an endpoint identity perspective, using endpoint identity groups, right, for dynamic policy assignment. So this is where endpoints are coming onto the network and they're being assigned an actual group. This also allows the administrator of ICE to actually look at those groups and take action on those groups, right? So we can see which groups have which endpoints and allow for manageability as well. And then implementing device profiling, right, for unknown and BYOD detection. So making sure that we understand what's on our network, putting them in the correct group, and then having the ability to send the endpoint the change of authorization to make sure that they're getting the proper access. From an M&T recommendations, a few things I wanted to call out here. Disabling unused log targets, right? So there's we want to make sure that if there are log targets defined or maybe old deployments or upgrade deployments, that we're only utilizing those ones that are being active, right? And disable the ones that we're not. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We don't want to create multiple DB entries, right, into ICE for multiple syslog targets. So we want to make sure we're following that, and we've seen this with customers that may be upgrading and have old targets that someone else configured. So we want to make sure we have that proper. Obviously, following the proper hardware configuration for the logging rates, VM configs, applying filters effectively. Just call out one example. Collection filters, for example, we want to make sure from an M&T perspective that we're eliminating a lot of the noise, right? So if customers, a lot of our larger customers are using load balancers, and for example, there's health checks that are configured on those load balancers, we have the ability to create collection filters, right? So that we're filtering out those health checks. So for example, if there's a load balancer that's sending a keep alive, every 30 seconds, it's not something we want to see in the M&T and the live logs, et cetera. So we have the ability to suppress those. And then disabling unnecessary diagnostics. I think we're all familiar with this for any network device, is to make sure that when we're not in the process of obtaining such data, that we are disabling those or setting them back to the defaults, and that will eliminate that noise and be a pressure release valve for the M&T. And then again, this goes forward as well with the live logs and the noise analysis, and investigate any slowness or latency that we can see in the logs or the GUI. And lastly, keep local log settings between 1 to 5. That's what we recommend for disk space utilization. And lastly, to continue on to M&T recommendations, log suppression, right? So we want to make sure we're enabling suppression for authentication from the GUI, repeated successful authentications, right? So if you've got endpoints that are authenticating frequently, we have the ability to suppress those. So we're not, you're not seeing those in the live logs and M&T, et cetera. So that's a recommendation. Configuring purge, as mentioned here, And then we do publish some handling endpoint attributions and interim updates, right? So enabling the attribute filter will suppress, ICE will consume any of the attributes that we're sending at it. So unless you enable the attribute filter, we'll then only process those attributes for which we have an authorization policy for, so that continue to keep the M&T healthy. And then from a managing TACX perspective, reduce TACX authorization logging if excessive logs are generated, minimize the frequency of scripts or tools running for TACX. I know a lot of customers have many of those third-party tools, so make sure we understand that. Filtering data on live logs. Again, we touched on that initially. And then identifying patterns in reports, right? So this is very important to take the corrective action for high logging patterns. So just to summarize, as we end the ICE piece, as we go forward to the wireless piece, having a proper M&T and the ability to troubleshoot is imperative for these networks because they are so dynamic in nature, and suppressing and keeping the logs so that we're able to, or the administrators able to properly view and handle those is extremely important.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amok Mourier, and I'm from the Wireless Escalations BU. And I'll be going over some of the wireless best practices specific to the 9800 WLC.
Hey,
First, we would want to.
real quick before you get going
Yes.
here, just wanted to remind our viewers we are taking questions. If don't see any yet there, we're taking them via Slido. You can get the Slido link in the YouTube underneath the video, under the description for the video. You can get the link to Slido and the passcode in there. So feel free to ask any questions here during the episode. Thanks, Mo. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Moving on, first we would want to start by making some ROM-on upgrade recommendations, as we have had some critical fixes come into the latest versions. For 9800M and H1, which are the newer 9800 platforms, we recommend you be on 1715 2R. And for the older 9840 and 80, we recommend you to be on 1712 2R and 1R respectively. Also, we have a QR code over here which you can scan. It'll take you to the document which lists out the caveats for each of these versions, and also provide a detailed guide for when you want to upgrade your ROM-on version. Next is the ISSU upgrade process, where we have had some changes done recently. Before we go to those, I would like to call out these two show commands, the show redundancy config failures PRC and the failures MCL. These essentially help you catch any misconfig or a config mismatch rather before you start the upgrade process. Now, coming to those changes I mentioned earlier, in 1715, there are some with respect to PunPolicer commands. Customers can have these commands enabled if you have had any ARP flood issues or excessive probes which are led to high WNCD issues. And if you proceed to upgrade to 1715 by using the ISSU method, the process will fail due to MCL errors. So those corrections need to be made before you start the process. Next, wanted to make some quick recommendation with respect to the idle timeout configuration. What we have seen is having a high idle timeout can cause multiple side effects, such as excessive accounting messages being sent to your AAA server. Client's tail entries can develop on the 9800 controller, and also you could have duplicate IP address issues. Now, the recommendation is straightforward over here. Configure your idle timeout to be less than your session timeout, your GTK key rotation timeout, and also your lease, DHCP lease time. Next, we move on to our high WNCD CPU section. First, I would want to talk about a new signature that we recently came across where we observed high CPU usage by the WNCD process because of excessive AWIPS alerts being generated specifically for the airdrop signature. What we found was in the last couple of months, the AWDL protocol, which is used by the airdrop feature on Apple devices, is being enabled more and more by default on those devices. And a recent change in the protocol caused the APs to detect session preparing mechanisms such as your master indication and the periodic sync messages which are sent by the protocol as fully established airdrop sessions. So essentially, this led to the AP to create false alerts and then send these AWIPS alerts to the 9800, which would then uh, process them and increase the CPU usage for that WNCD. The recommendations over here would be to disable the airdrop signature from DNAC or rather Catalyst Center if you're using Catalyst Center. Preferably disable AWIPS on your 9800 if you're not using Catalyst Center, since there are a lot of minute configurations which are available through Catalyst Center specifically for AWIPS. And lastly, if you do want to go ahead and use AWIPS without the Catalyst Center, be sure to track this particular fix. Next, before we move on to the next slide in this section, I would like to quickly call out the different load balancing mechanisms that have evolved across the versions on the 9800 with respect to AP's distribution on the different WNCDs. First was in 17.3, we had the round robin mechanism where the APs would simply be, the site tags rather, would simply be distributed in round robin fashion across the WNCDs. In 17.9, we developed the load command wherein each site tag could be specified with a particular load, and then they would be evenly distributed across the WNCDs by the system automatically. And finally, in 1712, we have the RF-based automatic load balancing mechanism, wherein the APs are grouped into clusters based on their RF neighborship, and subsequently these clusters are then distributed across WNCDs. Here we also have a QR code which you can scan, which will take you to the documentation to troubleshoot various high CPU scenarios pertaining to not just the WNCD, but even other processes on the 9800. It lists out what each process does and also helps you take steps proactively if you see that a particular process is utilizing more CPU than necessary. Uh, Next, we want to go on to the high CPU usage by the WNCD because of excessive inter-WNCD rooms. This can take place due to a suboptimal site tag design, and you would see this specifically during class changes which take place at the top of the hour, where a huge amount of clients roam at the same time. The recommendation is simple over here. Use automated load balancing mechanisms, which were described in the earlier slide. And also, you can use the WNCD distribution feature in the newer version of the Wireless Config Analyzer Express to better visualize your WNCD distribution and then take design steps accordingly. Next, I want to go over the MDNS and LSS section for this high WNCD scenario. What we have seen in the past year is the sole reason for a lot of customers running into high WNCD CPU usage issues is a poorly designed MDNS network. The recommendations are, again, pretty simple over here. Have a single transport protocol for your MDNS. It could be either IPv4 or IPv6, but we prefer IPv4. Apple continuity is a chatty protocol. Be wary of enabling the service, which is not enabled by default. And last is if you're using the MDNS gateway on the 9800, be sure to use a location filter so that you do not have unbounded queries and responses all over your network. Next, I want to talk about AFC and give the audience here a quick one-slide view of it. of what the AFC does, of what potential issues that the system can face, and what we have uncovered recently. So to start with, the AFC is essentially a cloud-based system to coordinate spectrum sharing for the 6 gigahertz band with the incumbents in that in the 6 gigahertz band. So in a nutshell, what happens is when a 6 gigahertz AP capable of operating in standard power joins the system, it sends information to the AFC cloud via the WLC. The AFC cloud then provides a list of available frequencies and powers based on the region's regulatory guidelines. Using this information, the WLC then assigns a channel frequency and power for that particular AP. Now, potential issues that can arise in such a system would be that if connection is lost by the WLC to the AFC cloud, in case of indoor APs, they will start operating in low power mode for their 6 gigahertz radio, but for outdoor APs, this will shut down the 6 gigahertz radio completely. Any issues that can occur on the AFC cloud side will propagate to multiple APs and will be pushed to multiple APs all at the same time. And finally, if for any reason incorrect location data is being sent by the AP to the AFC cloud, then the subsequent response from the AFC cloud will be suboptimal or completely incorrect for that AP. We wanted to highlight these two critical issues that we uncovered in the past couple of months with respect to AFC. First is that small variations in the data provided by the GPS module on the in the AP could lead to large errors in the final location data that was being sent to AFC. And next is that if there is an AFC license expiry for a particular AP, the AP would bring down the 6 gigahertz radio administratively rather than operationally. And then any subsequent efforts by the controller to bring the radio up would be in vain for that particular AP. We have both of these issues fixed, and they are fixed in 17.15.3 CCO along with the APSP3 for that version. Now, final two recommendations we wanted to make, which we thought would greatly benefit university networks. The first one was that this new issue that we found was FTSE clients roam fails when doing an intercontroller roam. The root cause was that the 11R PMK payload is missing in the mobility update, which goes from the old controller to the new controller, causing the PMK validation to fail during the 11R roam. The recommendation is again straightforward over here. The fix is present in 17.15.3 CCO, or if you are running 17.12.5, you could install this particular SMO. Last, if you are running an RMI plus RP HA setup, the recommendation is to add both the WMI and the RMI IP address to your AAA server as network devices. The reason behind this is that at times the WLC uses the RMI IP address to send radius requests for the clients. And if that RMI IP address is not added, the radius server would simply reject that request. You can scan the QR code shown in the slide which will direct you to the document which gives more details regarding this particular scenario and the configurations surrounding it. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Jesus.
Thanks, Amok. So I will be talking about the Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 best practices on the configuration sense. So first, in order to start transitioning more clients into the support for Wi-Fi 6E and the 6 gigahertz band, we have the transition mode. It's still recommended for .1x SSIDs. What we recommend is have the fast transition status set as enable, then add the .1x and FT.1x AKMs along with PMF optional. That is going to allow you to use the 6 gigahertz band and allow more clients to move to this band that has less better performance with less congestion and less channel utilization. Now, there is also a particular case if you are using now the personal SAE networks for Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7. On 17.15.3, the configuration that we have recommended is to add also SAE extended keys, and in case that you are using FT enable, also add FT SAE extended keys along with GCMP 256 as the encryption mechanism with PMF enable. You will see that starting on 17.15.3, there is a banner whenever you configure the security settings on a double LAN for layer 2, where you need to ensure that there is enough security checks for Wi-Fi 7. The reason of why we're doing this is that on 17.15.3, we are now enabling strict checks for the Wi-Fi 7 connectivity and to add the support for MLO and MLE. What happens is that the way that the configuration works, it's the APs are going to advertise the ML capabilities if those are enabled on the band. So clients will try to that are capable for to perform Wi-Fi 7 connections are going to try to negotiate MLO with the access point. However, if no AKM that it's configured for Wi-Fi 7, which could be SAE extended keys or .1x 251, it's not configured on your double LAN, then the controller is going to enforce a delete code and it will send out the delete reason of unsupporting Wi-Fi 7 security. So for clients, that will result in clients not able to connect to specific SSIDs once you upgrade to 17.15.3. The reason for that is that we have to be compliant with the Wi-Fi 7 standard. So in order to leverage MLO, which is a Wi-Fi 7 feature. So the workaround is pretty easy. Just add the SAE extended keys or the fast transition SAE extended keys. Now, we want to call out one issue with high latency on the 2.4 gigahertz band for 11N clients whenever they are connected to a Wi-Fi 7 access point. What we see is that these 11N clients will have a high ping latency or some complete loss of connectivity due to a root cause. The root cause for this is that the clients are sending packets faster than the search delay that it's enforced on these access points for to support the Wi-Fi 7 features. What we did as a fix is to better tune the transmit to receive search delay in order to better accommodate the scenarios for older clients or legacy clients. And this fix is introduced on 17.15.3 CCO, so you should be able to avoid this issue altogether. And finally, some general public service announcement regarding any issues that were found on interrupt connectivity for Wi-Fi 7 APs and some overall wireless controller issues. All of these have a valid workaround that we are dealing, and then we are also working on upcoming fixes that will be introduced in next CCO versions. First, it's one issue that we're seeing whenever there are servers that are sending excessive MDNS entries with to the controller, which in turn builds out the database, and that causes high CPU utilization. And whenever we see high CPU utilization, the controller is going to enforce throttling for WPA3 SAE client connections, causing them to not be able to connect. So the recommendation here or the workaround is to do a regular cleanup of the MDNS cache with a clear MDNS SD cache command. Also, we have seen that at times the WNC Cloud M process goes to 100% of CPU usage. This is particularly seen on clients on networks, where there are multiple APs that do not support geolocation derivation or AFC. So if you are using this feature on your network, just do no AP geolocation derivation RSSI, and that should address the high CPU on this process. And the last controller side fix or bug that we want to call out. It's an issue with VLAN persistence and 11R. At some point, some clients will be entering into this layer 2 authentication method state and will not need to do a fresh association to reconnect and recovery mechanism. You will see the L2 authentication start fail error show on the array traces for the clients that you are seeing stuck in this state. So temporarily, we recommend to disable wireless client VLAN persistent while the fix is coming out. And then talking into the interrupt issues with Wi-Fi 7. First, it's an issue with the Samsung S24 Ultra. Whenever they connect to MLO using an SSID that does FTSA extended keys, after the first roam or a couple of roams, the phone will stop passing traffic and will mark no internet connectivity on the GUI of the phone. So what we do in order to address this, it's to move to .1x. We have seen that this AKM is not affected, or disable fast transition. We have been in contact with Samsung. They have been committed to provide a fix in the timeline of September. And then we also had an issue with Pixel 8 and Pixel 8 Pro. Whenever they are trying to connect to and double land that it's MLO capable, where they will be unable to perform roams. So the phone will not authenticate, and we will see multiple prints of invalid PMK ID being printed on the controller array traces. So in order to address this, it's to disable, again, fast transition in the SSID where the phone connects. Or alternatively, we can disable the multi-link feature for the bands that are being used. On 17.18, we are introducing a feature to disable ML per double LAN, but at this point for 17.15.3, we have to disable it on the band completely. So now we are moving into some of our troubleshooting tools that we have and some features that we want to call out on some of those. And starting with the wireless config analyzers, we have been adding multiple signatures that are related to these large-scale education deployments, specifically calling out MDNS, these features of WNC high CPU processing and Rogue with the AWIPs. So be sure to run the latest version that will have those new signatures added. And you can also add the QR code that will take you to the installation guide and the usage guide for all the wireless config analyzer. This tool leverages the ShowTech wireless, and not only to give you a snapshot in time, but it can also contain some information to understand the client performance metrics across multiple days. So this is an added feature for you to track how you see, if you see any trends on number of clients ROM attempted or clients connections starting, as well as utilization and AP throughput, along with client mobility. So you are able to see more granular trends on different patterns for the client connections. Along with this graph, we have also added a performance metric for the uplink ports or the interfaces that the controller uses to send all the data. So you can see the number of kilobits per second that are being sent, are received, and the average transmission rates of those across the time. Additionally, we are now adding a better GUI representation for the CPU processes, both iOS XE and iOS. So you should be able to see the sorted processes, to see the ones that are in more use, and from there, take a decision if you are observing any abnormal pattern on the CPU processing. And to correlate with the CPU usage, we can also see the WNC load distribution. So in this graph and this table representation, now we are going to be able to see not only the number of tags that are assigned to each WNCD, but also the number of APs and the clients that were connected to any of those APs at that time, as well to correlate how much CPU consumption is having that particular WNCD. So it gives you a holistic view of your whole deployment. Now, also, and coming up from the inter-WCD roaming recommendation that Amok mentioned, the WCAE will have an RF view that will give you a distribution of how your APs and site tags are correlating to each other based on neighborhood from the RF perspective. So it is a good tool to see how your APs are seeing each other and predict some of the client movements based on these neighborhoods. So to improve and further finesse the load distribution on your WCDs. And now we also want to call out the KPI dashboard as well. There's a QR code that will take you to the installation guide. So just real quick on this tool, we are tracking in real time different metrics from the controller that will also alert you whenever an issue is seen, like high CPU or high memory utilization. And that way you can also correlate against other client performance statistics or radius metrics, AAA metrics. And the last tool that we want to call out is the Network Reasoner from the Catalyst Center. This is a very good tool that leverages most of the already existing tools within the controller, as well as intelligent packet capture, in order for you to get a complete set of logs from different data points of view for the wireless clients. And it will include also some AP information. So you only add the start the Network Reasoner, add the client MAC address that you want to track, and which sites are you going to be tracking on this client for this client, and that Catalyst Center is going to push all the configuration needed to enable packet captures, debug logs, array traces, and embedded packet capture in the controller in order to have a single set of logs that's used for you, that is going to be useful for you. Additionally, this is going to, Catalyst Centers, we have the wireless event analytics that is going to take this information and ensure which from which APs it is getting connected and see any details or any abnormalities that it detects on the connectivity for your client and on the radio events on the APs that it touch. So in general, we also have some other tools that we did not highlight for the matter of time, but they are good for initial troubleshooting, the ICE log analytics, the debug bundle within the controller, as well as the debug analyzer, the KPI dashboard, and integrated in the controller, we have the WalkMe and the CSAE. And for that, that it's all for me, and it's over to Jacob. Sorry.
Thank you, Jesus. It's fine. Okay, so let me take you through the best practices from the Meraki side or Cisco Cloud Wireless, if you wish. So on the first slide, we kind of covered that MR31.1.7.1 is the recommended firmware at given moment of time. This is currently sitting as our GA release. We do plan to drop one more MR31.1 release this coming summertime. So if you want to get your wireless stack upgraded to the latest and you don't want to use 31.1.7, then give it another 6 to 7 weeks and 31.1.8 will be available. Couple of things to mention about this 31.1 train is there are a lot of features that were added that will support a new license type, which will require MR advanced license. Most of those features are still available for free until end of July, so go ahead and test them. They're quite amazing. And one of the main remarks is that Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2 APs won't upgrade beyond MR30, right? So for any of the customers that are listening, if you're running a bit more legacy solution, those APs won't be able to go beyond MR30 firmware. We will still continue to support them until July 2026, so next year. Now let's talk about some of the best practices for 6 GHz and Wi-Fi 7 on the cloud side of the house. So I'm gonna start off by talking about some of the radio settings best practices that everyone should consider applying to your network. And there's 3 main areas, right? Everything starts with a well-defined radio settings. And it seems that the most common mistake is leaving those settings at default options, right? And then we let the algorithms do whatever they were programmed to do. So the first recommendation is to make sure that you do keep a nice balance between all of the radios that your APs are capable of, right? This is specifically for radios that can operate in dual 5 gig mode, 5 and 6, or dual 5 and 6, right? If you keep the TX power configured on a specific slot a bit too stronger compared to the others, then what you will end up with is a client imbalance per radios and basically suboptimal experience amongst client devices in the same physical location, right? Couple of pointers to keep in mind when you do specify that transmit power range. Keep in mind the free space path loss across different bands. 2.4 and 5 and 6 have different characteristics. And also all of our slots on the APs, they tend to have different gains, right? So do keep that in mind when defining the power range. That should be anywhere between 6 to 9 decibels wide. Next best practice I would recommend is to manually set the channel width. If we leave it at auto, and there's a high tendency everywhere to leave it at auto, then we basically let RRM to pick and choose what it thinks is best. Whether it's AutoRef, whether it's AI enhanced RRM, they tend to go higher where they can. Where this can become problematic is that most modern devices, they prioritize the use of wider channels. And we have seen it across multiple enterprises, multiple events, including Cisco Live Amsterdam, that if we have 6 gig on super wide channel, where you're standing right underneath a 5 gig AP, device will be very sticky, right? Also, one thing you should be aware of is that the moment you use wider channels, RRM tends to be very biased towards the use of PSC channels on 6 gigahertz. So for example, in a Meraki mode, when you use AutoRef or ARRM, if you want the algorithms to make the most out of the non-PSC channels available, then if you stick to 20 megahertz channels, you'll be just fine. Last but not least, on the radio settings side of the house, client load balancing enables active steering with 11V protocol. Couple of things you need to take into account. The AP will need to communicate with one another over layer 2 broadcast, right? So again, in a network with 500 to 1000 APs and thousands of users, if all of the APs are part of the same VLAN, part of the same layer 2 broadcast domain, it can become quite busy from the CPU perspective, right? So do keep that in mind. And also, if you have 2 APs that are closest neighbors that are unable to communicate with one another over that layer 2, there can be some unexpected behavior happening. Last but not least, on the radio side, RxSOP. I've spoke to a lot of customers during San Diego from higher ed as well, and it seems that RxSOP is switched off by default on most of the radio profiles. By default, it's actually sitting at -95, which means that AP will have to back off from any transmissions for as long as there's an active transmission up until -95. I think it will be a good practice, especially in those more congested environments, to start tuning that with -82. That will allow AP to transmit more often than backing off from transmissions. Now let's discuss some of the SSID configuration best practices. Starting with recommendations for Wi-Fi 7. So on MR31 firmware, any CW APs running in a cloud mode or Meraki mode, we enable Wi-Fi 7 elements on a per access point basis, right? Which means that if you're broadcasting more than one SSID, you have to make sure that all of those SSIDs do meet the security requirements defined by 802.11b standard, right? So here's a cheat sheet of what you should be focusing on for your open, personal, and enterprise SSIDs. In future firmwares, starting from MR32, we plan to introduce per SSID granularity, right? So if you have an environment where you need to keep a legacy SSID and then you want to have some fun SSIDs with the latest and greatest, that granularity is coming in MR32. When you do misconfigure things on the dashboard, we do make sure to provide you with some pointers and validation errors. So first of all, if you enable 802.11be mode and one of the SSIDs is actually failing to meet the security requirements for Wi-Fi 7, we will make sure to flag this for you. And then how do you configure those? You basically have to navigate to the access control page where you specify all of the security parameters. And at the bottom, there will be an expansion button that will expand all of the advanced WPA3 settings, right? It can be easily missed out, so be assured this is there, and you have full control over what security, what AKMs, what ciphers you want to use for your given network. Now let's talk about some tooling that I find quite amazing. And sorry, before we get to tooling, one more thing. Not everyone will move to Wi-Fi 7 train this year, but some of you may actually be moving to WPA3 and adoption of 6 gigahertz. One of the things that is coming with WPA3 is a 802.11w, which is the PMF, right? The way that 802.11w actually provides some extra security, validation, authorization within the wireless network is that, especially on the roam back events, the AP will temporarily reject association from the client device, and it will tell it to back off for X amount of time. Usually it's within up to 1 second, right? Where it may become problematic is specifically when you have low latency applications like voice, and you moved out of the association area of the AP, you didn't gracefully disconnect, and then you want to come back, you may expect some latency, you may expect something that will be noticeable. The best practice recommendation is to consider enabling fast transitioning or 802.11r. That removes the use of SK queries on the roam back events, right? So now let's talk about the tooling and some of the features that I'm quite excited to use myself. Starting with the RF health dashboard that's available under radio settings page. This has been introduced as part of the enablement and integration of AI RRM into the Meraki dashboard. The moment you have AI enhanced RRM switched on, you get all of the RF performance and RF coverage statistics displayed for you. We measure it on a per network basis. We measure it on a per AP basis. This is the same algorithm that's used across Catalyst Center, the same algorithm that's used across WCAE tool, right? Now built into the dashboard. It's quite great because it doesn't show you the average score of all the different metrics that we're pulling. If one of the metrics that we care about, for example, co-channel interference, the score is 0 out of 100, the total score for that AP or for that network will be 0 out of 100. We want to make sure that any assurance pages and tools that we give you will immediately get your attention right to the problematic areas. If you don't have AI enhanced RRM switched on, don't worry, we have some additional RF health assurance available. So under a network-wide page, assurance overview, we also display the RF health. It's a bit hidden. We have to scroll all the way to the bottom of the assurance overview. We've only launched it, I believe, 5 to 6 weeks ago, but it provides you the same level of visibility that the ARRM insights do. Those numbers, those values are only presented to you whenever there is a problem happening in your network, right? So that's the main difference. Last but not least, I wanted to make sure to cover one of the very important features that we have available, which are proactive pickups. So starting MR31, APs are able to buffer all of the traffic that's happening and going through in real time. And if there's a client join failure, if there's a roaming failure happening, the AP will automatically export those pickups, upload them into the Meraki dashboard. They're hosted on AWS container, and customers and partners will be able to access those within up to 7 days of those being taken and stored. This feature comes available with MR Advanced license as well. And how does it actually work? So I'm sure most of you are familiar with our timeline that's available under every single client details page. Whenever there's a connection failure, roaming failure, we do provide some sort of statistics, what channel band, and what was the SNR at the time of the event. Right now, on top of the failure, we will also show you and link you an associated packet capture for that failure, which you can either download and view locally on your device, or you can use a built-in packet analyzer into the Meraki dashboard, and you can look into the pickups yourself. One of the cool things is that once you open the pickup in the dashboard, not only that we will display you all of the packet captures, we'll also try to draw your attention to the exact frame, exact packet where the failure has happened, right? We want to make it stand out as much as possible. And as we can see in that example here, a four-way handshake was failing after key 1, right? And we can see there was this de-authentication. That's all for us, guys. Thank you so much for viewing, and make sure to enable all the amazing features. And until next time.
All right. That was great. Thank you very much. And I don't see any other questions here, other than some responses. Happy to be here. Great session. Thank you. Thanks for the feedback there, Max. Appreciate you tuning in. So with that, I want to take a minute to thank Jay, Amog, Jakub, and Jesus for a great session here on back to school best practices. Again, these sessions are really around making the back to school transition here in the fall when students come back onto campus as smooth as possible, making sure we're avoiding any issues and running the latest and greatest recommended versions of software and optimally configured. So thank you for tuning in. I would like to just remind you, you can like and subscribe the channel, youtube.com/@getunplugged for new and exciting, great content that came out after Cisco Live and that will come out in the future. We have our future schedule released out there as well. The link is right below the title bar on our homepage there on YouTube. And if you want to get a hold of us, if there's anything that comes to mind after this, you can always reach out to your Cisco account manager. You can email us at getunplugged@cisco.com. You can also DM us on Twitter at unplugged80211 or on threads at unplugged connectivity. So with that, thank you very much for your time today. And I thought this was a great session. Appreciate it. As always, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, stay connected and unplugged.